Hello and welcome back to the fourth episode of Tower Sports Advising Podcast. Today's special guest is Chad Shade, assistant coach and recruiting coordinator for Amherst College.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you having me on, man.
No problem. All right, I want to dive a little bit into your playing career. Start off here. Played football and baseball at Springfield College. Career stats in baseball: 315 average, 72 games played, 90 hits, 15 doubles, 4 triples, 6 home runs, 46 RBIs, a 458 slugging percentage, and a 394 OPP. 2018 set the program record with runs scored in a single season with 49. Won ABCA, Rawlings D3 All-Region, and NESCAC All-Conference accolades. Played his grad year at Kansas State University and final at-bat of collegiate career, 3-run homer against Texas Southern.
Makes me feel old now. Feels like that was centuries ago.
Right. So the only question I have for you about your playing career is, after playing 3 years at a D3 school and transferring to Kansas State, what's the big takeaways you take from playing at those schools?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to end up at Springfield College for 4 years. And then the COVID year kind of allowed me to go on and pursue, something different and go into a Power 5 school at Kansas State. It was an unbelievable experience. And the biggest takeaway that I really had, going from Springfield College to Kansas State is I was surrounded by good people at both schools, people that not only wanted me to be successful on the field, but off the field as well. And I think that was the most important thing for where I am now, really, in my development as a player and then as a young man, and now into a coach trying to develop, young leaders and young men in this world and that are playing college sports. I think that was, the most important thing for me was I was surrounded by really good people at both places.
Awesome. So then we're going to move a little bit into your coaching career. Started your coaching career in the Cape Cod Summer League with the Harwich Mariners in 2021. Then moved on to Kansas State as assistant director of player development in 21, and then moved in the graduate position in 2022. After 2 seasons at Kansas State, you joined Amherst coaching staff during the 2023 to 2024 season. Can you describe the differences from coaching at the D1 Power 5 schools compared to coaching at a D3 school?
Yeah. And, I was really fortunate, again, as I mentioned, being surrounded by great people. But to be able to go and coach in the Cape League right after I was done playing, had an opportunity to go there through a connection at Kansas State with Steve Englert. They just won the Cape Cod League Championship last year, so fired up for them. But it was great to be able to go and be around, obviously, great baseball minds and great players, of course, the best players in the world. In that summer, learned a lot. And then, again, was fortunate to be able to stay on staff at Kansas State and, finish grad school as well there. And, talking about the differences that you see from the Division III, Division I level, a lot of them are like the obvious. You get a lot more funding in terms of resources for, Division I school, where you're seeing NIL now. That's a huge thing where a lot of guys are getting paid to play, and, you don't get as much of that at the Division III level. With Division III, there's still opportunities for things like that. And again, we are very lucky at Amherst to have a lot of good alumni who want to see this program excel and succeed. And we have a lot of resources in terms of, machines, Rapsodo, technology is obviously huge nowadays. But again, of course, there's just levels to it. And again, with a school like Kansas State, with the resources that we had there, and it's just a little bit, bigger in terms of Division I, where they are required to have certain type of video and things available for other coaches for, scouting and other purposes like that. But, the money, again, is just the biggest thing that I kind of seen difference-wise, because the will to win, the want to win that I've seen at both schools is no different. We have guys that want to compete and want to win at a national stage and do everything they can to win a championship regardless of the level.
Next question, I always like to throw in a New England question for the guys that grew up in New England. Growing up in Massachusetts, the weather doesn't like to cooperate with baseball. With that being said, what challenges do you guys face at Amherst to prepare your season?
Yeah, so just like every other, Northeast school, Division I down to Division III, you're going to battle some weather and having, to make the most out of the space you have. Being lucky at Amherst, we have a great indoor facility that allows us to, scrimmage inside, be able to have all of our hitting rotations, get all the work we need to, defensively, maybe besides like fly balls, but I don't know of any facility that has a place where you can shoot fly balls into the air, right? So we got to get out in the turf when we can and be able to get our guys some fly balls. But it is, it is challenging to be able to navigate that. But that's part of the game, and you're going to have to deal with some adversity, whether it's outside, inside, in March or in May when you're in the postseason. So we really like, the opportunity that we have to be able to go through some adversity early on and maybe have some schedules that, aren't the perfect schedules, because that's the reality of baseball. You might have a game canceled one day, rescheduled another week, where now you have 6 games in that week. And to be able to handle that adversity and to keep getting better and to move forward is really important for us.
Moving into recruiting now, can you explain how competitive it is for a high school athlete getting recruited by a NESCAC school like Amherst?
Yeah, it's super competitive. And just a little bit about, us. We're a top 2 liberal arts school in the country. So grades are the most important thing. Of course, for us as baseball coaches, we're going to go recruit you as a baseball player. But immediately we have to go to, okay, let's see the transcript. Let's see the resume. Let's see what everything looks like. Because we are able to support, a certain amount of students every year through the admissions process. But without the grades and them doing their part in school and in the community, we can't get anybody into Amherst College. It is, a very rigorous process. And so, and it's like that with all the NESCAC schools and obviously with Ivies as well. And being able to be a well-balanced student athlete is really important here.
What are you looking for in a recruit when you go to see them play an event, both hitters and pitchers? Obviously, I know you're a hitting guy. So is there something that stands out for you about both?
Yeah, I think, the big one that's not physical with watching a guy, like how hard he throws, how hard he can hit a ball, is how they compete. I think watching guys out on a field, whether it's they're taking a BP round, whether they're just shagging fly balls, or if it's in a game setting, like just watching how they compete, how they go about their business. Because, as we're recruiting guys, you're recruiting a guy that's going to be here for the next 4 years. But then after that, they're going to be an alumni and part of the program, part of the history and tradition of your school. So you want good people. As I mentioned before, talking about the opportunities that I had playing wise and coaching, I was surrounded by good people. So I think that's really important for us. And, our philosophy with recruiting is we're trying to recruit good people that are going to make our program better on and off the field.
Can you explain the process of how the recruiting process works from when you see an athlete until they're on your campus?
Yeah, and to jump back to kind of your question before, again, we're going to look for the physical pieces of it of, guys on the mound, like what do they have for an arsenal? It's a 2-3 pitch mix for strikes. Is it a guy that's going to be a back end guy for us, a starter for us? Same thing hitting wise, like guys that are going to fit into our lineup. They hit for power, they hit for contact. After we kind of decide, through those evaluations of, hey, this is going to be a good fit for this year's class, it's really about communication with these guys, making sure that we stay in touch with them and they staying in touch with us throughout the recruiting process. Because eventually we'll get into a pre-read process, which all high academic schools will have, which will show where they stand in our admissions. After we get that, if that is all clear and goes well, we just want to stay in touch with them because, again, the recruiting process is ongoing. We'll start recruiting some guys, into their junior years that we're staying in touch with up until this pre-read process comes about and it's time to make a decision for them of where to go to school. So the communication is really huge, whether it's through text messages, emails, them sending videos and updates throughout the year, and also them kind of just letting us know where they're going to be throughout the summer, especially in that junior year, which is their big recruiting year, obviously, of making a decision. So the communication is just the biggest thing to be able to stay in touch. They know what we need from them. And then we obviously, towards the end of the summer and then into the fall, we'll start to make some decisions about where we're going to go with our class.
I think a cool part of what you just said too is you guys start your recruiting process earlier than most Division III schools due to how competitive it is, one, not to only play at your school, but also to attend your school.
Mm-hmm.
I think parents kind of get lost in the equation of NESCAC schools are recruiting as soon as they can junior year
Mm-hmm.
because of how competitive it is between Ivy and NESCAC to get into those schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. A lot of these student athletes that are looking towards high academic do know that, but it's also important to understand that a lot of guys that a lot of recruits that might be listening to this. It's also not too late if you do start at going into if you're in the summer of your senior year. There's still opportunities out there for you at high academic schools as well. But as you mentioned, yeah, it is super competitive. So we're on the road. We're recruiting all summer, into the fall, in the spring, winter camps as well. Like, we're recruiting year round to be able to find guys that are going to be a good fit for our program.
So coaching at a NESCAC school, are you guys allowed to use the transfer portal? And do you personally think the transfer portal is helping out the sport of baseball?
So we are allowed to use the transfer portal. For us, just personally, it's going to be school to school. We have had some transfers in here. It's just a little bit tougher given the academics of it for guys to be able to transfer credits over and to be able to, slide into the school piece of it for us. But yeah, we absolutely can use the transfer portal, and we have. I think the transfer portal is something that's really interesting right now, and where the state of baseball is. I think there's some good and there's some bad. Obviously there is a lot of positives where people have opportunities to go and find a place that is right for them if they were currently at a place that wasn't. Right. And I think that's really important for guys to be able to find that right fit, because unfortunately it does happen in college sports where you go to a school and it just doesn't work out for you for whatever reason. And the transfer portal is allowing guys now to go and find a place that is a right fit for them, where they can go get a good education and be set up for their future. I think obviously the negative side of it is a lot of people think that maybe the grass is greener somewhere else, right? And that's probably a pretty cliche saying, but it's the truth with a lot of young student athletes now, where sometimes they don't think their situation is good and they want to go try to find something better. In reality, that coach or that program was probably the best fit for them, and they were just trying to look for maybe any excuse to find somewhere else to go. So again, I think there's some positive, there's some negatives to it. But I think as this new world of college baseball and the transfer portal continues to grow, I think there will start to be a balance, and it'll start to kind of figure itself out with the amount of guys that are getting into the portal, and how guys are going about getting into the portal.
I think a big piece of that too now is the portal. I mean, with D1 roster cuts happening next year, the portal is going to be more flooded than it's ever been. So on the first podcast episode with my brother, we talked about how the kids are going to have opportunities to play at Division III. So go play where you're going to play.
Yeah.
Because you've seen more kids now than ever that have been at the Division III level that end up at the D1 school because they took those 2 years at D3, became a more polished hitter or pitcher on the mound to throw 2 to 3 pitches for strikes, and guys are recruiting them out of the portal, and they're at these Power 5 schools like we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super competitive. And, a lot of coaches that are out there, it's hard. And this is the reality of it for high school students. It's like you're not just competing against other juniors and seniors in high school baseball. You're competing against 20, 21, sometimes even 22-year-olds that are in the portal looking to get somewhere else. You're looking at a guy that's already had 3 years of playing experience that's looking to go to another school, right? And as a college coach, you're looking at it, and in my opinion, right, if you are looking at two guys, a high school guy or a college guy that's already established in college baseball, it's hard for a coach to look at that and say, hey, like, I don't want the established college guy. It's like, let me see, what the high school guy can do. And again, different schools, it's going to be different with how that process works. But as I mentioned, these high school students are now going up against, athletes that are already established in college baseball and that have had that experience. And as you were saying, yeah, like it's the truth. It's like there's no better experience that you're gonna have than playing experience, right? There's obviously a lot of good development at all these colleges and schools that are in the country, but you don't get any type of experience like actually playing baseball games on the field.
The last question I have for you about recruiting is, what's the best advice you personally would give to an athlete trying to get recruited today?
Yeah, and I'll make this specific to us, just because I think, again, every recruiting process is going to be different for each student, for each school. For us, it is, again, the communication, just staying in touch with us, making sure, and again, it doesn't need to be an everyday thing. It can be an every couple weeks, just sending a video update, a little schedule update of what you have going on, stats, like all stuff is good information just for us to be able to see, and obviously shows your interest in that school. Right? If you're reaching out to a school, it shows, hey, I'm interested in you. And now we know, hey, you're interested in Amherst College, right? So like if we're going to continue this recruiting process, we're going to go into a recruiting process with someone that knows about us and that wants to be here. So I think for kids trying to get recruited right now, it's just finding out where coaches are going to be, like seeing what our summer schedule is like, seeing what camps we're going to be at, see if there's any camps on our campus if you're that interested in us as well. I really recommend for guys to be able to go and explore and see schools, right? See what the right fit is for you. So as you're kind of going through the recruiting process, it's got to be a two-way street, right? You got to want a school, they got to want you, and it's got to be a right fit. So just trying to do as much research as you can and being really good about staying in touch with coaches that you're interested in is going to be the biggest and most important part of the recruiting process, in my opinion.
So a lot of players that I've coached, I guide them towards Twitter because I feel like that is an easier option for coaches to follow you throughout your recruiting process, because you can take your 8-second, 10-second, minute-long clip of, hey, this is my swing. I worked on this today, blah, blah, blah. And then your next tweet can be, I'm going to be at the Boston Open. Here are my 4 games, what field I'm on, what time, and this is what we're doing. So I think a lot of kids don't use that as their advantage to be like, all right, this is where I am all week, and maybe that coach will be there. Because you never know who's going to be there, and you never know. You could run into a school that you never thought you'd ever play at, and you can go 3 for 3, and a school would be like, wow, that kid's pretty good. I tell kids all the time, I'm like, you go 3 for 3 in front of a college coach, you're going to at least get a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important, thing that you mentioned, Zach, of like the social media. And that's obviously taken off in recent years. And that's something we use in here. We get an email from a guy. It's like, put your Twitter or X, username in there, because we want to have as much data, as much, video and things as possible. And again, as I mentioned, like if you don't want to blow up a coach every single day, right, which is probably the smart thing to do, as I mentioned, every couple of weeks is great to be able to stay in touch. But it's like, if they want to see more about you, right, like follow them on Twitter, they follow you back, and then now you have, a list of videos from the last summer into your spring that you're able to go and watch, and coaches are able to see more stuff, without fishing through, their emails. They can just do it. And the reality of it is again, like, social media is so big nowadays. Like, you got coaches on Twitter just in general, right? Now you're popping up on their feed to be able to see the work you're putting in, some of your game film and stuff like that as well. I think that's a really, really good tool for guys nowadays as well.
I kind of laugh. I did Coach Morales on podcast too, and he said jokingly, he said, I could recruit off my couch. And which is funny to think, but we've gotten into the world where all of these recruits are just posting videos and videos and videos. And he's like, I can see this 8-second clip and we can move into, hey, I'm going to come watch this kid play.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, again, like as we're going through our emails and stuff, like that's where a lot of recruiting starts, right? As we're sitting here in the spring and maybe not able to get out to as many games and do things because we have our schedule, right, that is really ramped up now. It's like, how can we still recruit? And it's like, that's how we're going to recruit right now. It's like, we're going to see guys in the spring that are posting videos that are having little cut ups of at bats, pitches, and now we're able to still continue our recruiting process, continue to add guys to our board. And now it's like, okay, we saw them on video, liked what we saw. Let's find a way to see them over the summer.
And it goes back to, you guys have long bus rides. So you're sitting on a bus, scrolling your phone, looking at recruits.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I tell kids, anything you post to an extent can be good,
Mm-hmm.
because you could go 0 for 4 with 4 punch outs, and you could post all 4 at bats, and you might like something that they did. That doesn't mean the results are based off the results. It's, all right, that kid's got a good swing. Maybe he's got a little bit hitch. Well, we can work with that. Oh, and then he has a 4.0 GPA. That plays into what we're looking for. All right, but both of us are hitting guys, so I want to move into a little bit of hitting. In your first season with the Mammoths, you guys hit 315 as a team, 383 hits, 61 doubles, 12 triples, 24 home runs, 261 RBIs, slugged 444, and had a team on base percentage of 416. What is something that you preach to your hitters to buy into your philosophy of hitting?
Yeah, so with our philosophy, we want to attack, but we want to be disciplined. I think it's really important for our hitters to be able to go up there with an aggressive mindset and to hunt their pitch. But we got to be disciplined in those situations and be able to execute in those situations. And part of that whole process is being unique to who you are. I'm a believer that everyone's swing is going to be different. There's not a one size fits all for a swing. And there's obviously a lot of information that's out there now with different hitting gurus and video of MLB players and all this stuff that's out there and available. And I think a lot of it's good information, but you got to understand that your swing is going to be personal and unique to you. So what works for someone else might not work for you. And I think that's really important as you take this approach as a college hitter of, wanting to attack and be aggressive and get your pitch. And also understanding that you need to be disciplined, right? There's a balance. None of that is going to matter if you aren't going up there confident with your swing and what you're doing, right? And I think that's just an everyday thing for our guys is when they go about their business, when they have their BP and we rotate in our stations, is they're working on something. And I think that's really important that, it doesn't matter what the drill is or what the circumstance is that you're in, right? It's like you can work on something at all times. And I think that's a really important piece for our group of hitters and why we had a pretty successful year last year. And I think they've really bought into what we're doing here. And again, we've had some guys, we have some veteran guys that have been really successful. I think we got a good group of young guys too that, want to compete and are pushing those guys because they also want to get on the field.
Last year as a team, you guys had 172 walks and 56 hit by pitches compared to 160 strikeouts at the plate. Can you explain how crucial that was for you guys to win games? Because nowadays you don't really see the 1-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio.
Yeah, I think the name of the game is getting on base, right? Like that's how you are going to put pressure on defenses and produce runs. So walks and hit by pitches are huge. I think you see really good offenses that command the zone and that get walked and hit by pitches because you getting on base is now going to cause the defense to work a little bit harder, right? It's going to make the pitcher work a little bit harder. It's going to create better pitches to hit for the guys that are at the plate because if we can run a little bit as well, it creates something else for the defense now to worry about. And again, we're talking about, you mentioned some of the doubles, triples, and home runs. I think that, that's where the punch is going to be made as an offense. But having guys on base is, again, the most important thing. If you hit a double with no one on base, that's just a double, right? If we have first and second now, we hit a ball in the gap and get a double. Now we have a 2-run inning. So getting on base is just the most important part of being a successful offense and then being able to capitalize on those situations.
All right, let's move in a little bit about development. Are you guys at Amherst open to recruits about the development that needs to be put in before arriving on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's a part of a lot of what we do here as well in terms of developing guys and getting the best version of themselves. But as we have our recruits coming in next year, if there's certain things that we see that we think like, hey, we want you to work on this before you come on campus, we're open to that and we want to communicate that with them. But we also understand that we're not around them every day too, right? Like they have their high school coaches and stuff there around them. And I think it's really important for them to get that development from those coaches as well that they're currently with. And part of our camp process that we have is we give feedback to guys if they want it. And I think that's a really important thing, because if guys are coming to, say our camp and have, a good day, bad day, or whatever, we want to be able to provide them with something as well afterwards, to be able to say, hey, this is what we saw. Because the recruiting process, as you know, is just, it's a tough thing to navigate at times, and being able to get that feedback and know what you need to work on to maybe be at our program or get into another program is really important for some of these guys as they continue their college search. So that's definitely something we're open to with our guys that are coming in, and with guys that maybe are in the recruiting process right now that come to a camp. We're definitely open to giving feedback, and what we see that their development process needs to be.
I think a key point of what you just said is obviously they have high school coaches and they'll have you guys in the following year. I tell kids all the time, I'm like, it may take 3 coaches for something to process in your head. They may be saying the same thing, but at the end of the day, what something that one coach said to you might stick better than the other two. And it's not because you're an uncoachable kid. It's just the way it came off, and it resonated in your brain of, wow, that makes sense. Even though coach said this, well, that coach said the same thing in a different way, and it stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important, especially when you get your guys on campus, right? Like we have our guys on campus in the fall and we're working with them. And then we obviously get to know their personalities, how they work, how they process information. And as you just mentioned, it's all about how guys receive information. I tell guys that I'm like, hey, there are certain things that I say that might stick with you and click. And then there's things that aren't, and that's okay, right? We're going to find something that works for you. For me, for the hitter side, there's a lot of different cues and things that you can give through a guy's swing. And it's like some things might like make a ton of sense right away, and something else might make 0 sense. And we just have to figure out what works for you, because as I mentioned before earlier with, our hitting approach, like every swing is going to be unique, and every personality, every guy is going to be a little bit different with how they process information. So it's really important for us as a staff to be able to figure out what works best for each guy.
What's a key thing that you guys do at Amherst to improve the development of your players that you might have learned through your playing career that personally helped you?
Yeah. And, you talking about like me going back and thinking about myself as a player is really important, because I think that you learn a certain way as a coach and as a player, and sometimes you think that might be best for how someone else learns as well, right? You're like, hey, like when I was playing this worked best for me. Like this is how I learned, this drill or this type of swing or whatever it might be, to be able to get the most out of my body, right? But now as a coach, you got to realize that everybody else is going to be unique and everyone else is going to be a little bit different. So finding out what works best for them is going to be the most important thing. As I just mentioned, we were talking about, the development process of guys, that we're recruiting. It's the same with the development process of guys that we have on our campus, and figuring out how can we get the most out of them, what drills, what cues, what way do they learn best to be able to process this information, because that type of stuff is going to get the most out of our guys. So again, it's trying to put your, the way you learn maybe aside for a little bit, and just trying to figure out, hey, like this is the way this guy learns, or this is the way that this guy needs to be communicated with to be able to be successful on the field.
Last question about development is, can you explain how crucial the development at Amherst in your freshman year fall leading into spring is?
Yeah, and the NESCAC is a little bit different than other Division III schools. We do have less days in the fall than other Division III schools, so it's really important for our guys to be locked in for those days. And again, with our facilities, we have a lot of space for those guys to be able to go out there and get their work in. But for us to be out there as coaches for the amount of days that we have, it's really important that we get the most out of those days, and the development process during those days to be able to see not just our first year guys, right, but our sophomores, juniors, and seniors, to see, hey, what has been going on over the summer with you, is we're in communication with them, but we're not watching them every day like we are in the spring, right? So it's like seeing what what strides they've made over the summer as well, going into the fall, and how we can now even build on top of those, right? Those skills and those things that they have developed over the summer. So that fall is really important to be able to get an idea of where our guys are at and what we need to do in the winter to get ready for the spring moving forward.
Moving into kind of talking about roster, do you guys have a roster limit at Amherst? And do you have like a limit on how many recruits you can bring in a year?
Yeah, so our roster is typically going to be around, 32 to 34 guys. We don't necessarily have a roster limit, but we have a smaller roster size. As I mentioned, with how many guys we can support through the admissions process, it kind of keeps our roster at a certain number. And I think it's something that we really enjoy here at Amherst College too, because our guys are our guys. When we're recruiting guys into our program, it is, hey, again, I mentioned the two-way street earlier. It's like, you want us, we want you, and like this is what we're moving forward with. This is our roster moving forward, and these are our guys.
I think it kind of explains too of like how competitive it actually is, because now we're talking about D1 roster cuts at all D1 schools. So you guys are already at the 32 or 34 range.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct.
I looked at you guys' roster. You guys kind of have kids from all over the country. How do these kids get in contact with you guys?
Yeah, a lot of it's through email. X, talking about social media stuff. It is really critical for us, right, to have guys that are reaching out to us that are from other parts of the country and letting us know where we're going to be, because we go to events all over the country as well. Just last year I was in Chicago, California, with our head coach. We were in Boston, Long Island, went down to Florida. So we were all over the country recruiting guys. So having these guys that are going to certain events or going to be in certain places reach out to us is really important in our recruiting process, because now we kind of have a little bit of a database before we go to these events. And again, on our end, we are going to try and go through as many guys as we can before these events. But the reality of it is like, if you're going to an event with 200 kids, right, the guys that maybe emailed you before, right, now your name is in that coach's head, right? It's in our heads like, oh, so-and-so reached out to us before this event. And now when you get to the event, you might be looking for this guy because they sent you an email the day before, 2 days before, for the coach to be able to look at.
Awesome. So let's move a little bit into camps. Do you guys host a showcase or team camp on campus throughout the year? If so, when do you guys usually have them?
Yeah, so we typically have 3 camps a year. We'll have one in the winter, typically at the end of January, the beginning of February. And then we typically like to do a camp in July and then towards the end of August or early September. So those are kind of our three camp areas that we like to have. And we really enjoy having camps on our campus. One, because if someone signs up for our camp, we know they are interested in Amherst College. 2, it gives guys a real feel of like what it's like to be an Amherst College baseball player for a day. We got obviously our full coaching staff, and then we have our players also working the camp too. And they're, one of our best tools to be able to talk to these student athletes about what it's like to be a student athlete at Amherst College. So these guys will run through, a workout, but then they'll also be able to walk around campus, see what it's like to be around some of our guys. Again, getting that feel of what it's like to be an Amherst College baseball player, I think, is so important for the guys that attend our camps.
I think a big point you made there is pretty much as the student athlete of seeing yourself on that campus. I feel like a lot of kids cross a lot of schools off their list nowadays because it's like, I looked at it online. The baseball field doesn't look that nice. Like they don't have a good, let's say, a weight room. The classrooms are kind of a little bit old school. And you get to the point of like, did you even go to the school? How do you know what it looks like?
Mm-hmm.
That picture could be from 2003. You don't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think kids gain a lot of value from going to these camps of like, wow, this place was really nice. I never thought I would like it.
Mm-hmm.
But then they get there and it's like, oh, I had a good day. I had a good conversation with the coach. And like, there's some interest in that school that you never thought there would be interest in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another part of why we like to have guys up on our campus, because I think it's we love this place. And our grounds guys, their facilities guys do an unbelievable job with our field, as you mentioned. Like, I think that stuff is important nowadays. But as you mentioned, that you need to be able to go and see it for yourself and see if it's a fit, right? And I think that is a huge part of the recruiting process, is finding the right fit and not just looking at, a picture or, trusting what someone else tells you. Like, you got to see it for yourself.
So the big question I get about NESCAC schools and Ivy schools is, what are the benefits of going to show ball or a head first showcase?
Yeah, I think the benefits are, exactly what you're seeing from them. Show ball will put something out of all the schools that are going, and that's the benefit right there, is you are now getting in front of a ton of different coaches at one event. And as you were talking about earlier about, hey, you might end up being seen by a school that you didn't even know you'd be interested in, right? So you might go to one of these showcases with the mindset of like, I want to get seen by Amherst. I want to get seen by Harvard. I want to get seen by Princeton. And then you end up going out of there with 5 other schools that you went and saw, like, during a meet and greet, and you're like, wow, like, hey, I think I really like these schools, and they showed some interest in me. So I think that's the benefit of it, is like, you are going to go and get seen by the schools you want to get seen by. And then you're also going to get seen by a ton of other schools as well that might have interest in you that you might not have thought you'd be interested in before.
All right, Chad, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to wish the Mammoths good luck this season.
Awesome, Zach. Thanks again for having me on, man. Really appreciate what you're doing, and obviously having me on your podcast. It was great to be able to sit down and talk with you, and again, appreciate all that you're doing.